Hello, this is Amanda Baruch coming to you from my basement office in Salt Lake City, Utah. In this brief podcast, I'm planning to share a little bit of information about me, about my family, about my career, some bits and pieces in hope that we'll identify areas that we have in common and maybe a few connections that we can talk about when we finally meet. Thank you for listening. Nope, I did not grow up in Utah. As this map might suggest, I actually hail from Southern California, quite close to the border to Mexico. As this arrow indicates, I was born in Long Beach, and I grew up in a small town called Hemet in the late 50s and early 60s. Actually, all of the 60s. Hemet was a sort of small rural town. My dad had 40 acres. He grew alfalfa. We had horses and cows and goats and dogs and cats and chickens and bunnies as well. Lots of creatures. One nice thing about growing up near the Mexican border was that classes in Spanish were actually required of us. And so I think once or twice a week, a teacher would herd the elementary school kids into a room and we would celebrate the language. And as a result, I have a certain sort of ingrained appreciation for Latin sounds and a little bit of understanding and ability to speak. Wish I had a little more. So if you can help me with that, I'd love to hear from you. And meanwhile, since I left, of course, Hemet has changed a little bit. If you look it up in the Urban Dictionary now, you'll see it identified as the meth capital of the Central Valley of California. I'm afraid it's gotten kind of rowdy and seedy these days. And now we have some new arrows. The first pointing to San Francisco as a way of reminding me to tell you that I completed my graduate work in social work at UC Berkeley. I did the MSW and the PhD there. I was there in the late 70s, and I'd have to say the program I was in was rather more conservative than you'd think, given that it was Berkeley, but it was still a really stimulating place to be, quite enjoyable. From there, I went to the island of Guam, where I lived for my first few years with my husband, and then we came back to Salt Lake City. We decided to settle in Salt Lake, first of all, because I was offered the job at the University of Utah, which was just too attractive to turn down. And second of all, because we had spent our honeymoon hiking in southern Utah and thought it was the most beautiful place we'd ever seen. So our children were born here, and the result is that we are now 4. Let me introduce them to you. First of all, chronologically and in other ways, we have Larry Lawrence, my husband, who's a lawyer downtown. He's planning to retire from the practice of law, but will continue to teach at the law school here at the U and pursue his great passion, which is working with the Road Home on issues of homelessness. Our son, Nathaniel, has just finished his 4 years of medical school and is waiting to hear where he will do his residency in psychiatry for the next 4 years. We're hoping, of course, for Utah, but there are lots of other possibilities. A true Utah native, I guess it's safe to say his passion is skiing. And of course, while he's skied all over the world, he's never found snow to compare to Utah powder. Our daughter, Ariana, is just finishing up her 3rd year of law school in Vermont, where she's planning to focus on environmental law. She'd love to be a litigator fighting the good fight, but I guess a little bit depends on the job market. It's a little tight for lawyers, as you know, these days. So again, we're hoping for a job in Utah, but we're trying not to be too attached to this possibility. And then there's me. I came to the University of Utah in 1985 as an assistant professor. I was hired to set up a specialty in aging for the University of Utah's College of Social Work and devoted a good deal of my early career to that, and most of my research and publication has been in the field of aging. Of course, social policy is also a major passion for me. I've published a textbook in that area that you might have seen. And most recently, I've switched my attention to narrative. So the research I do is primarily related to narrative, and I'm completing a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing in the English department at the U, which is kind of both exciting and challenging for me. Another exciting challenge has been my work at the University of Otago in New Zealand. Since 2007, I have had sort of a bicultural life in which I teach and do some research and supervision at this university in New Zealand. I developed for them a course on narrative, which is a 6-week elective for their medical students, and that has been a great joy. But apart from that, just being able to be really immersed in a different culture has been really fascinating, and I think it's enriched my teaching at the University of Utah. I'm lucky because the University of Utah has agreed, and so I've been allowed to have this sort of part-time existence going from hemisphere to hemisphere at various points in um, the year. Of course, much of the teaching I do there is online as well, and we follow a similar pattern there with face-to-face workshops accompanied by online instruction. I find it works really well, and I'll be eager to hear how you feel about it when we're done with the semester, even midway through. Feedback's always appreciated. Now I'd like to close by showing you the cutest members of our family at the cutest point in their lives. Maddie is a chocolate lab. She's now been with us for 12 years, so you can imagine she's changed a bit since this photo. And Commander Wedge is our daughter's kitty, who's now a big cat. I think he weighs 35 pounds. We really enjoy animals, and actually I'm quite fascinated by the relationships between human and creatures. So we'd love to talk to you about that as well. And now you've reached the end of my remarks. Thank you so much for your patience and attention. I really look forward to getting to know you this semester.